Well, so we have a couple of questions that we like to ask everybody. They're just fun, and it's actually very poignant. You're drinking coffee right now, but how do you take your coffee?
Well, black usually. Mm-hmm. Like if I'm making coffee, it's black. On Sundays, heavy cream. Mm-hmm. But it depends on the Sunday, not always. And then if I go to Starbucks, which isn't very often, but a lot of times when I'm traveling, and then today there was a fire drill. So
in the building.
Starbucks. And when I'm at Starbucks, which is like probably once a week, I do nitro cold brew, but with the salted vanilla cream.
So good.
You have to like ask for the salted cream on the nitro, and it's great.
Yeah. So do you find people, like when you go into a Starbucks, do people get intimidated, like nervous? Whoever's making your drink, they're like, oh my God.
No, I don't think so.
This has to be amazing.
We did know the gentleman making my drink today, because he works at our Short North store.
Yeah.
Super sweet. But no, I don't think so. I mean, I think they get a little nervous when I'm at Dairy Queen. Which is, I have my Dairy Queen that I go to. My son will only eat Dairy Queen hot dogs. I mean, he doesn't eat a lot of food. Mm-hmm. So Dairy Queen hot dogs are like a way for him to like, I don't know, get some protein or whatever.
Like a win. Just like a,
but they all know me over at Dairy Queen, and I always, of course, end up with something for myself as well. And
how funny! Oh my God,
that's hilarious. It's like, oh no,
yeah, okay. Oh my God.
You're like, oh, it better be straight.
Is it so? Is that you have one son, or do you have? How old is he? Or
he is 10, and then my daughter is 12.
Okay. Awesome. My nephew is 9, and I just started realizing like that. Because at first I'm like, oh, he's getting so old so fast. And it was kind of like, you know, I'm struck as an aunt. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm missing out on those young years. And then I'm like, wait, 9 is so fun.
The most fun is, I think, just happening now. When they really start to become themselves and they understand a lot more of their power in the world now. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I feel like, and that's super fun to see them using all the stuff that they've learned, you know, since they were born, but like really being able to apply it now in ways that do affect the world around them. It's cool.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to ask you, so talking about, you know, you were talking about earlier being at Grandview Mercantile and Starbucks, do you get recognized? I mean, in Columbus, you're...
Yeah, all the time. But, you know, I don't remember a time that wasn't the way, because I started my first business in the North Market when I was 22.
Right.
And fairly quickly, because I lived in the Short North also, fairly quickly people in my neighborhood or in the Short North knew who I was. And so everywhere I would go, you know, and I didn't have a car, I walked everywhere. And so everywhere I would go, I was just very, and I also had like, you know, pinkish hair and very platinum hair and sort of pinkish in the 90s or whatever. I mean, so I was very conspicuous.
Right.
Yeah.
So I felt like people were always saying hi to me even back then. So I have always just felt like a community person, you know, even though I'm very much an introvert, very, very much an introvert. In fact, I think I'm in the business of ice cream in many ways because I can stand behind the counter and people come to me. Whereas, like, if you see me go to a party, I'm like standing against the wall. Like, I don't know how to work a party, you know what I mean? At all to this day. However, I know how to just walk, I guess, down the street and say hi to everybody, you know?
Yeah. So does Columbus,
so even to this day.
Does it feel like a small town to you then? You've been here for so long and...
Yeah, a little bit, although I think Columbus has become a city where, like, on any given weekend, there's too much to do. You know, I remember in Columbus, you know, or maybe it's just because I was young, but like it just feels like there's so much to do on a weekend now. You know, it starts to feel like a big city. You know, you have to choose what you're going to do during the week. Where I remember, you know, it was just you used to have, you know, a couple of options. You know, there was a band playing somewhere, there was something going on at the Wexner Center, and then you would go to the North Market or maybe the Art Museum or whatever. But like, it really feels like there's just a lot going on now all over the city. And I don't know, that makes it feel like a big city to me.
Yeah.
I think Columbus is kind of on that teetering, like we were always like kind of, you know, we're a city, we're bigger, and recently we've seen so much growth, especially in the art community, and like when it comes to pulling away from, we're not just Ohio State anymore, we have, you know, so much culture developing in our downtown, which I feel like was lacking. I mean, at least when I was in school, I never found like a lot of like need or business to be downtown or like exploring different parts of Columbus, and now it's like everywhere is a farmer's market or, you know, more art or like new boutiques popping up and all of that, and it's always, I mean, we've always been kind of like a test market city, but now
well, and I love to go back and look at some of the history here because it didn't just happen. I mean, it's been happening since, you know, whenever. I mean, I don't know. I mean, German Village was
Right.
saved in the 1950s
Yeah.
by a group of citizens who wanted to keep our city, the history of our city alive. And Victorian Village and Italian Village and the Short North, those were in the 70s. And then, of course, in the 80s, there was a huge punk rock scene here between the Short North and campus especially. And that's just so cool to look back on our music scene here in Columbus and the roots that we have here. And then grunge in the early 90s was really big here. I mean, we were always on the stop. I mean, I remember playing pool with Nirvana
Oh my
in
God, you're
1991 at this bar called Stashes. But we would go see them all the time, and they were just another band traveling through in like the 1990 or whatever. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like there's been this like incredible, each generation kind of taken that torch and passed it on, and now we're in this place where like it really just feels like there's so much going on here that we're not just known for one thing or two things or five things, but many things.
Do you feel any responsibility to take your torch and?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I in my small way, because when I was I remember when everybody left. I mean, when you're 20-ish, you either decide to stay or you decide to go to Portland or you go to Brooklyn or wherever. And a lot of people did that, and that's great. But a lot of people stayed too. And I think the people who did decided that it was much more interesting to be in a city that you could actually impact versus going somewhere where the city is going to become you.
Yeah.
And where where you live is your mark in the world. For me, it's different. For me and those who are here, I think we know that we get to participate in creating this community in what we want it to be. I think that's really, really cool and really interesting. But yeah, we were talking about being very proud to be from here very early, and back in a time when people weren't saying really we're proud to call Columbus home.
Right.
When you weren't putting that poster up on a wall or whatever. When actually, even back then, all of the restaurants and bars and clubs and all that, they were trying to be anything but Columbus.
Yeah.
Literally, they were all trying to be, something like something was going on in Manhattan or then eventually Brooklyn or whatever. So we're bringing stuff to Columbus, and I think we're just tired of that now. I don't think anybody does that, or at least we don't easily fall for it. You know what I mean? Now we're looking for homegrown, like the stuff that actually came from here, that's authentic to here.
Yeah.
First.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I heard you say in an interview that Columbus was like your church.
Well,
and
yeah.
I thought that was such a cool thing to say. And so I was wondering if there's any part of Columbus that is, the way I worded it, particularly holy to you.
Oh, yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Meaningful.
I just think that Columbus has become like my moral compass. I did grow up with a little bit of church when I was very young. My mom taught Sunday school, but she was an atheist and still is. She's very interested in religion, but doesn't subscribe to any of it.
Yeah.
And then other people in my family are Unitarian or whatever. And so I didn't really grow up with church being a very important part of my life, especially after we moved to Columbus, away from Peoria, Illinois, where I'm originally from, and we belonged to a church there. And so I think I didn't get a lot of those maybe lessons that you get, after like the golden rule, you know?
Right.
And I, when I started in the North Market, I just started learning from the community around me and realized that your community will hold you to a high standard, which is really great, high moral standard, and all of my values come from that place. I listened very closely because they're all right, You listen to that sort of collective, and so I've always that's kind of how I like, is this the right answer to this question? What would this whole community say? How would people view the answer or my answer to this?
Yeah.
And so, in a way, I feel like we can, as human beings, hold each other to that very high standard.
Yeah. I feel like that is, in a sense, what a church is, which a lot of times people get away from that, but it is, relying on people to hold you accountable and having that, identity or that, like, a stone.
Community.
That's super strong and you can always relate back to. So, I mean, finding that in whatever speaks to you. Well,
and now I love to go to church, and I'm not particularly religious. I could see myself finding religion later in life, but I love to go to church. And one of the aspects of church that I love so much is that when you're in a church, everyone around you feel love for. And I want us all to feel that way everywhere.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So that idea of like, it doesn't matter who you are at all, I love you. Do you know what I mean? And when you're in church, it's easy to feel that way. And so I kind of feel that way about Columbus.
Oh, that's incredible.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's amazing. Well, I'm going to take a little bit of a left turn. This is another question that I like to ask all women that I always meet. Was there a time you remember as a young girl when you saw an image of a woman, whatever it was, like your mother, a movie star, whatever, that you were like, oh, that's glamour. That's an empowered woman, you know?
Yes, and I think it was Katharine Hepburn wearing, you know, some like very tall pants on like a set in some movie in the 40s. She was probably outside, you know, like I just had this image of her, and I just always thought like, that's the kind of woman that I want to be. And also the idea that like we were sold this idea that women were sort of, I don't know, dress wearing, I don't know, rule following, you know, soft people in other generations. And I didn't believe it when I was young because of images like that. But I absolutely don't believe that now that I've become a student of history and like, you know, looked at history and found that that's actually never the way that women really ever behaved. You know? I mean, some of course, but.
Well, so obviously, you know, you have a daughter and you're also fairly, you know, famous on social media. Are you concerned with how you portray yourself on social media? Are you specific about, you know, what you're putting out there, how you're putting it out there, how you look? Like, you know, for example, like the Katharine Hepburn, like that was something that stuck with you. So do you feel a responsibility to women on how you present yourself?
I do. I mean, I never, I don't talk, absolutely. I mean, without question. There are probably things that I do that I don't even know that I do. Like, for instance, I don't talk about my husband very often on Instagram or any social media or anywhere, to be honest. Right. Because I think that when women talk about their husband, the natural sort of thinking, I think, from anyone in the room is that you're somehow lower in power than he is. And I will tell you that when Charlie and I are in public together, more than once, more than many times actually, people will say things to us as a couple, directly to both of us, like this. They'll say, oh, so you're the creative one, pointing to me, and you're the business mind, right? Yeah. And like, I don't want to put Charlie down because he's an amazing human being, but he's very far from a business mind. He's an analytical guy. He's an intellectual. But I wouldn't call him a business mind. Yeah. But because he's a man, you know what I mean? And I think that women naturally fall back on that a little bit too. And I think that it's not something that I would blame any, you know, I don't blame women have said that to me maybe even more than men. Yeah. So yeah, things like that. You know, I try to just sort of speak for myself, and I think that's part of it. And yeah, I don't know. Yeah.
Is that something you had to learn over? Like, did you at first, you know, when you first started seeing success and you guys are arm in arm, would you kind of like, is that something you had to learn to be like, I should be, you know, speaking up in a way, or did you notice it after so long and, you know, that was kind of like, I don't like the way that makes me feel, or?
Yeah, I haven't been able to figure that out yet. I mean, I definitely learned that if I'm standing with Charlie in public and I even like, if I touch him, if I like, you know, put my arm around him or whatever, that people start talking to him and not me. So and in fact, Charlie and I both do this anyway. When we're in public, we just kind of split up. If we're at a party or whatever, we don't sit together. Partly it's for that reason, partly just because we're curious about those around us and we're not, you know, we see each other all the time. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, it took a little while to figure that out, and you know, but I'm also like my grandmother's daughter, you know what I mean? Yeah. Like, I'm not really that worried about what people think about me at all. Like, if one day I'm you know, one thing and one day I'm another thing. I mean, I'm a pretty bold person, especially now, and you know, maybe if you'd see me in my 20s, it would be very different. You know what I mean? What you have seen from me on Instagram 20 years ago would be a very different me. Although maybe not, because I was bold enough to do what I did. So
right.
I don't know.
It's always been in you.
Yeah, but I mean, I'm old enough now that like I think I'm not that worried about what I'm putting out there. I think the collective is the pattern that you create in the world is the thing, not the one day, you know? Yeah. So even if whatever I am one day, it'll balance out to be right.
Okay. Yeah. Wow, yeah. Really we kind of actually recently talked about that in our last episode, just like how your daily decisions, your daily life, like how you are presenting yourself, like, I mean, honestly, down to like the minute, if you think about it, every situation can be building, you know, what your future is, who you become. And so me and Maddie were talking through like, what are our daily just like routines, something that we do to keep ourselves level or to keep ourselves reminded of where we want to be or who we want to be.
But at the same time, like I said, it's the pattern. So you can have an entire, I mean, honestly, you can have an entire decade that's off.
Yeah.
Let alone an hour or a day,
Yeah.
right? And still create a life that's amazing. That's exactly what you intended and what you wanted to do. It's not about trying to be, you know, on brand for you every single moment of every day.
Right.
In fact, you should push yourself a lot. And I actually was just talking to Danielle this morning about how I'm like never comfortable in the world. You know what I mean? But that's because I never like I'm always pushing myself to somewhere that I've never been before.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And that's like a you know, that's you know, when you push yourself outside of what you know, you can't control how people view you.
Yeah.
Like there's no way, because you've never done it before, and you're gonna fall and you're gonna maybe look like an idiot or just whatever. You know what I mean? You don't know what's gonna happen.
Yeah.
Right.
But that's what you should be doing. And then over time, your successes and the failures kind of add up to be this thing or whatever.
Yeah.
Something I always think about is like growing up, it was always very acceptable for men to be like messy, or like you had these like anti-heroes like Tony Soprano and Don Draper, and they had these very layered, like they didn't compartmentalize their life. I mean, those are characters, but it almost seems like men can have a lot of, like, be a Renaissance man, have a lot of different interests, but then women, it's almost like they want you to pick what you're gonna be. So it's like I'll feel pressure to be like ultra feminine all the time, or like ultra, you know, I wanted to be an actor, so I had this pressure on myself, like, okay, that's what you have to do and you can't do anything else. So did you ever feel like that, and how did you kind of say, no, I run this business, I create these, you know, beautiful ice creams, I'm an artist? How do you maintain all those
honestly,
identities?
I'm still fighting that a little bit, because I do think that I do think that when you're a woman who is a bold motherfucker, right? Like, pardon me. That's not what the world wants to see. I mean, they don't.
Yeah.
And when you just say it, you see it today, which might change in an hour or two. I mean, you know, and a lot of the male heroes that we see in the world can say what they want right now and then do something different later, or end up evolving later. Yeah. But as a woman, I do think that you're supposed to show more humility in the world, and that's that whole like, no, you know, hold back, don't make your decision yet, don't say something that you might regret later,
right?
Which is bullshit. You should say whatever you want.
Right.
You should think and say what you want, because first of all, it makes other people trust you more, right?
Agree.
When they understand what you're gonna kind of how you're gonna react, I think. But also, that's how you learn. You know, that's how you learn how people react to the things that you do. And I just feel like that exists still within me now, and I think that's still everywhere for women. I mean, men have problems too, and issues with being males in the world, but like that's something that I feel like definitely as a woman you get all the time.
Yeah, for sure.
Do you feel like in the business world or in the culinary world, like, have you been treated differently as a woman?
Well, I wouldn't say that there's like some
Boys
conspiracy.
Club
Well, there's definitely a boys club, but I wouldn't say that it's like that I blame anybody. There's nobody to blame. You know what I mean? Like, we're all going to do the easiest thing we possibly can. And if you know, being in the chef world is very militaristic, and it's, you know, and it appeals to men, and they have a certain language that they speak, and it feels easier to do. It's the same thing with the lawyers and the landlords and the bankers and all that. They all kind of speak the same language, and they've all been together, and they're literally generations of behaviors and culture built up around that like when you're a woman in that room, you upset, you know, you disrupt that, and they don't know how to handle that, and I get it, but at the same time it's very hard to break into, and so but the good thing is that means you don't have to, you know, appeal to that. You can break off of that and go start your own thing and do your own thing. It takes sometimes longer, or it's different, you know, in creating your own thing, it's a different thing. But I'm kind of glad that I wasn't necessarily accepted into the chef world. I mean, for a little while, or, you know, maybe even, you know, in my whole career, it's a little while, but I mean, it was years sort of trying to get attention, but whatever. And then going to like food shows or whatever, but literally being treated like, you're the entertainment,
right.
by these chefs who would be very drunk and, like whatever. You just kind
of... Like a novelty almost.
Well, and also like, the girl,
Mm-hmm.
And in this very masculine, very macho world, you know what I mean? So...
Yeah, we actually both work in the restaurant industry. And the chefs, we've worked under a executive chef who was a woman, and she kind of has expressed those feelings as well. It's harder to have a voice, or to feel like you have a voice, not necessarily that no one's listening, but to feel like people want to listen, or that you have some kind of control. And even that people in the dining rooms like, oh, tell your chef he can, thank you.
For sure.
For doing
same with
man.
me. That happens all the time. Give this to your boss. He's going to love it.
Yeah.
He's going to want to know about this.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
I mean, it doesn't happen anymore, but, definitely when I was younger.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the good news is that you can break off from that and go start your own thing. And I really think that that's actually more fun. It's a hard adventure, but it's really fun. Mm-hmm. Just break off of all the, these cultures that they have created around that. There are a lot of rules. Mm-hmm. Like any other community or culture, and you can just go make your own.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But the hard thing is now you got to make your own, which means you got to attract people to it. You've got to be, it's a different thing.
Yeah, different kind of scary.
But it's great. You just go over and you're like, I'm not, just drop out of that. I'm not one that will was ever. I mean, from the time I was 6 years old, I was never going to work under someone else's culture or rules,
right?
Rule system. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? I mean, besides I guess our society and the things that we collectively agree on or whatever, but in terms of my everyday where I go to work and all of that, and school was the same, and so leaving and making your own is really great. That's if I had to define what entrepreneurship is, that's what it is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. It's incredible to say at some point you just knew I have to do something on my own because that's the person I am. I've always been that way. And to have that realization, I mean, I think that's one of our questions also, was that something you just knew and you were always working towards it, or was it some kind of after all these experiences, somewhere in your 20s you're like, oh, this now makes sense?
I knew I would be an entrepreneur. Mm-hmm. I mean, I knew that I would have my own business when I was a kid. I also loved art. My grandmother was an art teacher, and so I didn't know if I was going to be an artist, but either way I knew I wasn't going to be in the regular world. I wasn't going to climb the corporate ladder or any of that kind of stuff. I was going to be an artist. I was going to be an entrepreneur, something that where I was going to create my own space in the world.
Yeah.
I knew that. I don't remember ever not knowing that. And I was always the kind of kid, after school who was organizing everybody in the neighborhood to do something, and make stuff. So yeah, I feel like these are instincts in a way that we have when we're really young. I mean, I think a lot of times you can figure out what path you might be likely to pursue even when you're very young. Mm-hmm. I also was brought up by very non-traditional people.
Yeah.
Or at least some of them in my family, my grandmother being an art teacher, but also just being a firecracker of a human being, and so, I mean, I was lucky in that way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I think that's something that society in a lot of ways, I mean, being in my 20s now, I graduated, and I've, that struggle of well, I should just, get the 9-to-5, get the benefits, get the 401k, all of that. And even for people who have that ambition to start something on their own, the security draws them back in each time.
Which is totally fine. That's all great.
Yeah.
I think as long as you're also pushing yourself to follow the things that make you excited and that pique your curiosity, right on the side, because I think long term, the last thing you want is the job that you're kind of not excited to go to at 9 and very excited to leave at 5, right? Because that's your life. Right. You get one.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I would rather I mean, you can make a living doing something you love.
Mm-hmm. Right.
You may not make $500,000 a year doing it, or you might, right? But you can make a living doing something that you love and you can't wait to go to at 9 in the morning.
Right.
Right? You might have to live on $30,000 for 15 years like I did before you actually can make, whatever. And when all your friends become doctors and lawyers and they're driving BMWs and whatever, and you're feeling like you're a total failure, or at least perceived as that, or the hobbyist, you know what I mean? But whatever, who wins? You know what I mean? Because those people, I'm going to be 46 this month, and a lot of the people that I know from high school who did it right? They followed all of the right paths. They hit all of the landmarks. They've got their Range Rover now and their house and all the kids and all that stuff. I wonder, like, how many of them are truly happy where they're at.
Satisfied.
You know what I mean? Because I don't think it's as many as what we are taught when we're young.
Right.
And especially now, like when I was younger, it was different than I think your generation. I think you have it a lot harder because so many people now are expected to go to college.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that necessarily helps you later in life. I mean, I think that knowledge helps you find joy in life, you know, because you have that perspective. But I don't think that we've done it right for young people right now in terms of like turning college into a career center.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And like, expecting those specific milestones. I mean, you know, when I was a kid, there was still you can become a doctor, lawyer, or astronaut or whatever. But doctor, lawyer, you know, now it's like banker or whatever, like or whatever it is, investment banker.
Yeah.
But I just feel like, I don't know, maybe there was a little bit more freedom when I was a kid, you know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just to kind of take the risk and
become a musician if you want to, or a dancer or whatever. And like parents weren't saying that like success looks like this. It looks like this kind of a car, living in this kind of a neighborhood, having these kinds of friends, wearing these kind of clothes. And I feel like now it's and Instagram doesn't help.
Right.
Yeah, it feels like a really confusing time because there is the sense of like Instagram and internet, you have freedom to, you know, you see people start businesses all the time on Instagram, all like every day. But then on the spin side, you, like you said, parents like you were taught this is what you're supposed to be doing, so you're constantly kind of like, I could but I can't, and it's definitely a pool. I can't
tell you how many like young people, and I mean still in their teens, I have met over the last several years who like cry when they meet me because they like are, you know, I'm like here encouraging them to like, do what they love and be who they are, and like and they want to be a dancer or something like that, and their parents are the biggest obstacle for that. They they can't go back to their parents and say I'm not gonna study STEM or science or whatever because I'm an artist.
Right.
You know, like it's, I don't know. I feel like it's a weird time right now.
Yeah.
Because it's not going to help. I mean, you know, if you graduate with a degree that you're not excited about, you could probably spend 15 or 20 years in that and get by. But then where are you? You're now 40 years old and you're like, what?
Kind of lifeless.
Well, and like once you get the house and the Range Rover and all this stuff, or whatever car you're, whatever, that's the problem because now you can't go back. You can't go back to a $30,000 a year job while you build another life because you have bills and you have kids you have to put through college, you have certain expectations from your community that you have to live up to or whatever. So it's, I don't know.
That's why your message is so important though, because it takes one person to tell one other person you can be who you want to be, just someone that they believe, you know, and then, you know, spreading that message is very important, I think.
Yeah, as long as you're willing to, I would say, suffer for it, but you're going to suffer at some point anyway in life.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like, as long as you're willing to, like, and in fact, probably the best advice I could give young people is to live on a shoestring as long as you possibly can. Well into your 30s if you can, you know, because that is a superhero skill when you don't need the material stuff that other people in your generation or in your community feel that they need and have to support. Then you're really truly free because financial freedom is everything. Like not having to be beholden to your payments is like everything. That gives you the freedom to quit your job if you want to, you know, or to move somewhere. If you know what I mean? Like then you're really free. But you can really, you can really mess it up that way.
Yeah.
So was there ever a time, I mean, you are such a bold person and such a passionate person, but I do wonder if there was ever a time when you were like, I just can't. Like, you know, if there was ever something that happened or ever an experience you had, you know, and how did you continue? Keep going. I mean, was there ever a time where you're just like exhausted?
Well, I mean, I closed my first business, which was just a little business in the North Market, a little stand, an ice cream stand in the North Market. And I had worked every hour that we were open for 4 years. I mean, that was like, I only had one day off a week. I also didn't have a car, so I walked to work and took the bus. And for a while, it was a great adventure. But after a bit, it became too much. And I was the only one that worked there. And I really burned out. And I burned out in a huge way. So when I left that business, closed that business, and walked away from my business partner, I for a few months believed that I was going to go do something else, that I wasn't going to make ice cream anymore, and that wasn't my future anymore. And that's a little bit tough when you had this future that you imagined and then all of a sudden you don't have that anymore. I mean, it's very tough at the time.
Mm-hmm.
Now you have to reimagine who you are and who you're going to become and what you're going to do. And, meanwhile, again, all my friends had become something and I was like starting over. And it didn't take me too long, maybe 6 months, to start writing a new plan and want to get back into business. But most of the time I have, for whatever reason, had like almost like a supernatural belief that I was on the right track.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And that was against almost every odd and every other person's opinion in my life, maybe even, for most of my life. So the weird thing about being an entrepreneur, I think, is that you're kind of on an island for a really long time, and then all of a sudden everybody's on the island with you.
Mm-hmm.
Right,
you know what I mean?
right.
It sort of feels sudden for you, but
Yeah.
you've been working on it for a really long time, kind of out on your own.
Mm-hmm.
And in some ways, for some reason, that fueled me,
Mm-hmm.
But I think you have to be okay being on your own like that for a long time.
Yeah, for sure. That independence, you learn so much about yourself,
Mm-hmm.
like in what you. So when you decided like this is definitely something, like you knew was always a calling for you. Was it just like the feeling you had when you were doing it, or was it like you just kept like things just kept coming your way, and you're like, I feel like the universe is telling me I need to keep doing this, or where'd you get that instinct?
So I was, I think that like because I was studying the things that I wanted to when I came up with the idea. I mean, that's how I came up with the idea.
Mm-hmm.
Because I had been studying art, so I was learning about how to tell story through, various methods, through visual and whatever. And because I was working at a French pastry company at the time, and there was like a French-speaking kitchen, and the family was there every day, and it was lovely, and the flavors were just everywhere. And then I was thinking about perfuming, so I was thinking about scent, and I was spending some time in the chemistry department at Ohio State and with scent compounds and whatever, I was just doing whatever and meeting a lot of people that I thought were interesting. And those are the things that crossed over for me for ice cream. So then ice cream is all about scent. It's a butterfat and cream is like the perfect carrier of scent. And because I had been doing that, and then of course the culinary aspect of being in the kitchen, like I knew that ice cream could be what it was. And that sort of, actually the moment that I realized that was actually like an epiphany for me. It was like the sky opened up. I viewed my future. I knew what we could do. I, of course, thought it would happen over 3 or 4 years, not 15 years, which is what it pretty much took.
Yeah.
But I just set sail from that moment on, and it really was like I just knew what was over the horizon. And at that point, it's like, the actual like being an explorer on a ship metaphor really kind of rings true. It's like you kind of know what's over there, and you've got people, on your ship, and you've built this great ship, and you're kind of going there, but you're not positive exactly how you're going to get there. But but you have this belief about what's over the thing. So just keeping going was fairly easy for me because I just believed that so much.
Yeah, and then when it's almost like a science of everything coming together and like an exploration. When you said the sky opened, you got epiphany, I got chills. I'm like, that feeling must have just been incredible. Like
it was, but at the same time, I didn't have family. In fact, my family had fallen apart. I wasn't even in contact with anyone in my family anymore, and I like didn't have money, and I was working a couple of jobs, and like, no way was I going to get a bank loan. I wasn't in a position to believe in myself, but for whatever reason, it was just like, what? If I just do one thing today, that's an advancement. That's enough. And then tomorrow I'll do another one. And, that was just how I did it. And still to this day, that's how we're doing it.
Yeah, that's enough. That's always a good reminder.
So when you came back to the North Market, did you find a different momentum? Was there a different momentum, a different energy behind what you were doing?
Well, there was, because I felt like I had solved some of the problems.
Okay.
So at Scream, which was my first business, I was making whatever I wanted to every day, and I was still thinking, I would say I was thinking like an artist. I thought, that would be like the exciting thing about my business is that people would come down and just want to see what I was making every day or be okay with whatever I had that day. But that's really not how business works, and that's not how even community works. You have to have like consistency. So I learned that during the time I took off between my first business and my second business. I learned that by going to other businesses and knowing and reflecting on what brought me back. And it's always whatever I had the last time I was there. Always, right? Yeah. I might change my mind when I get there, but I always get the same thing.
Right.
Always there because of what I had last time. whether it's service or a product. And so once I realized that like all the stuff that had been very popular at Scream, I needed to have every day at Jeni's. And that changed everything. Like it really did. And so then I could have I could still make whatever flavors I wanted to all the time. And then the ones that were very popular that people loved, I could move it over to the signature list as long as I had those and never ran out of those. So if somebody was like having a dinner party and they wanted some salty caramel ice cream, they could come get it, and they knew I would have it available in pints. And it wasn't a matter of like, let's just go see what Jeni has and I'll, figure out what I'm going to put.
Yeah.
Right.
So that changed everything. And then from there, it was word of mouth, and that just traveled very, very quickly. So it changed everything. Yeah.
And it's funny because I think artists a lot of times, they just want to, I'm an artist. I just want to put out what I want to put out. I want to create, and I want people to love it, every bit of it. But when you start mixing art and business, you come over those crossroads and you're like, it's not always about me and my art. It's about people and the people I'm serving every day.
Well, and even in art, are you really willing to give it that? I mean, a lot of artists had to actually die before their art got, accepted by the world. And, like, that's great. That's, like, endurance, But, like, I think that most artists also think about what they're putting into the world, and they can think like entrepreneurs now. And it's not that my grandmother would totally disagree with me, but she never wanted to be paid for anything that she did for that exact reason, because she believed that art was like this specific expression, and I believe that too. But you can also find ways to support yourself, you know what I mean? And if you're thinking about doing that, then you do have to take into mind what other people might need, want, desire, something that makes them feel good,
Well, just like women, nothing has to be one thing. You don't have to just be an artist and only pursue that.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yes. And that's true of a career. It's just true of life.
Yeah. Yeah.
So your name is on the storefronts. Is that like pressure ever? Like,
and
if
on Danielle's chest right now.
on my mom's chest, she has 10 of your shirts. She wears them every day.
I love it.
Is that pressure? Like, when things are going great, it's great. If things aren't going so great, it's, I guess it's so impressive to me, literally putting your name on it. These stores are all over the country. How does that, you've become a celebrity. Like, how has that has that been strange?
Well, I always, I recommend, there's a lot of ways to name a business. You don't have to name it after yourself. And I wasn't going to, and I was so against it. But it was really the best thing I did, because it takes a long time to build it and to build what your reputation is. And I think that you don't have that supernatural, like, passion for it unless your reputation is at stake.
Yeah.
And I learned, because I had Scream, which was called Scream, and I remember at the end of the night I would just go home, and it'd be like, maybe I'd leave some dishes for the next day or whatever. But at Jeni's, well, first of all, I wanted to call it something else, and everybody was like, well, wait a second, you're going to call it that. But then there was Scream, and then nobody called it Scream, everybody called it Jeni's, because you were there all the time.
Right.
Like, you can't make a fourth thing.
Yeah.
So I had named it Jeni's, and I was there like maybe 2 weeks into our opening, and I was there like on probably midnight on like a Friday night, and I was like, I can get here a little early tomorrow and finish these dishes. I had this like massive stack of dishes. I was exhausted. I had been working, nonstop for 2 weeks, and I had hit the wall. And so I was like, at Scream I would have done that. I would have just gone home and come and done the dishes the next day. So I turned around and I was taking my apron off, and I remember this moment too. It was like an epiphany too for me. And I turned around and I saw this dumb sign, which was still just printed in Kinko's on paper, just black and white sign on paper, hanging from some clips from the ceiling. It said Jeni's, and that was like my name up there.
Right.
And I thought, well, if I don't do these, who will? Like,
right.
if this is the example that I'm setting,
right,
then that's not good. So I turned back around, I finished the dishes, and like that changed everything. You know what I mean? It really is like that subtle power that you have in your name. It's so much more than just the letters of your name. Like, it's everything that you stand for and what people know about you, and it's the cumulative effort that you put in every day, that pattern that you create in the world. And if you aren't willing to do it, then maybe you don't earn your customers and your team and all that stuff. So
yeah. Do you think your that epiphany led to influencing the way you present yourself every day? Like, did it influence the way you dress, or like how you styled your office, or whatever? Did you feel it trickle into the rest of your life?
I did, but I most of my life wore a white shirt every day because I made ice cream and I served people. And then, you know, sort of as an introvert, I liked to kind of be behind the scenes. I didn't really want to be out front so much. I love service. I love being in our stores, and I love, you know, being in the test kitchen and sort of doing creative work here. But I wasn't that into like actually being a figurehead for the company. In fact, I wore a lot of black and white for most of my life, and only recently. When our company went through what we went through in 2015, which was that we recalled a whole bunch of ice cream because we found listeria in some of our ice cream. And thank goodness we prevented any kind of outbreak, and we prevented anybody getting sick. Nobody got sick. Everything was actually done really well. But we needed to humanize the company, and so I needed to jump out front and show that, like, you know, 1,000 people work here and we're really awesome, and like everybody has good intentions, and and you know, we also made the right decision, and so I had to do that, and so that was when I was like, I can't wear black anymore. I need to get out front. I have to like figure out what an ice cream maker maybe looks like, and I started thinking like, well, lots of stripes, you know, lots of like, you know, and that's when I started wearing flowers, and I just was like, I just have to get out and just talk to as many people as I can. So that was like the beginning of kind of a new life for me in a weird way.
Is there an entrepreneur, a person in business that you model your life after at all? Anyone that you admire?
No. I mean, well, yes. I mean, many people that I admire. I mean, almost everything that I wear at this point are female founded and led companies. I buy from so many people. I think of the people that I give my money to as part of my sort of my community, my tribe, my almost friend group at this point. So very inspired by so many things going on right now. Just so much to be inspired by right now. But I'm not like modeling my life of anybody. I do want to, like, you know, and that's one of the reasons that I love being Columbus, because we have really cool things going on here, but at the same time it's kind of my quiet place, and where I don't feel as much influence. So I spend a lot of time in LA or in New York or in a lot of other cities, and I just feel like there's just so much going on. There are a lot of people in, you know, women in business or whatever. And then I come back here and I feel like I can get rid of the influence, because for me that's the most important thing.
Right. Kind of stand on your own a little bit.
Yeah, you got to walk away from it, because it's you don't even realize you're doing it, but you start to look like everybody else. And then you start to behave like everybody else. And then you realize my opinions came from other places. And there are like millions of ways of thinking about any one problem.
Right.
And right now we're all thinking the exact same way.
Yeah.
And when you go online and you see the opinions people are writing about them, wherever they're writing about them, you're like, there's like 4 different ways of seeing this one problem. But there's millions of ways in reality to see it. But people are boiling it down to the wrong conclusions, you know. And I feel like getting away from that is really important. Getting that quietness to actually think. Right. And you realize how complex things really are, nuanced.
Yeah, absolutely.
So when you're coming up with a new collection for the ice cream, is it that do you have those aha moments, those like tingle moments of like, oh, this is the next thing, like?
Yeah, a lot. And usually it's about an hour after the deadline. When we were supposed to have it, like, you know, 8 weeks ago or whatever, and the final deadline is right now, and then it's like, and then what I'll end up doing is like, well, if it's a good good enough idea, we'll extend the deadline. So then it's like we have to think about, is it a good enough idea to do that or not?
Right.
But yeah, that's how it usually works. But I do think that it takes, like, creativity works, like, it's like there's like the back burner and the back burner and whatever, and it starts to move forward over time as you're honing in on an idea, or the sort of funnel gets more and more narrow, and so your ideas get better and better the closer you get to the actual deadline. But you've got hundreds of ideas in the works at any given time, and a vast timeline. So we're working on things a year, even 2 years now, looking out, even more than that. Wow. But we're also working on things that for today. You know, the deadlines are today and whatever. And so it's, you know, that's kind of how creative thinking works. To like, there's always something kind of boiling up. Right. And the aha moments tend to go, for me, after I've had a lot of time to sit with them, and then, you know, it's like basically at the end.
Yeah. I feel like
close to launch date as possible.
Yeah. But I don't think that's like, I feel like sometimes people are like, well, you know, it's like you said, an exploration, because you start off, you're like, where to even start? You know, it's this huge cloud, and then over time it condenses, and then once that pressure is put on, you're like, okay, now I'm not like so flighty. I've already explored all these things. This
It's not procrastination. People think it's
Right.
procrastination, that you're not actually doing work on it.
Yeah.
But you're doing thinking on it. You're doing feeling on it.
Right.
And you're getting into it. And there's that happens so it's just the weirdest place. You're walking through Target or whatever and read something and it'll remind you of the project you're working on for next year. Or, you read an Australian food magazine and it's like the opposite season of now. And like, so all of a sudden you're like, okay, you know what I mean? And like, you don't know where all that stuff's going to come from. You got to let yourself absorb all those things.
Right.
If you try to push it, it just comes off as flat.
Are there any tips you have to like pull inspiration in your life? Like, do you travel or do you like to like meditate, whatever it is for you?
For me, it's all emotion.
Yeah.
So whether I'm traveling or meeting somebody at our stores, it's like, or reading. And I often read history instead of fiction for that reason, because I can get into it more emotionally because I know it really happened to a real person.
Yeah.
But I feel like if you can create that feeling, that's what we're trying to create everywhere. It's not, we're not trying to create beautiful design. We're not trying to create something that, looks good or sounds good. We're trying to make something that feels good.
Right.
And that is different than what I think, I don't know, that's different than what we get taught. We're taught to put everything in a grid, especially in like design school and stuff like that. Or to make something look a specific way, or what aesthetics are.
Yeah.
And in the end, it's not really about that. It's about how does it feel. And I feel like the same thing is true with business, any kind of business, but also, of course, with ice cream, because ice cream is so personal.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. But you are also designing beautifully, by the way.
Yeah,
so.
but part of that is because we're willing to take risks. Not everything works. And when you see, sometimes we'll pull out something that we design and it doesn't look like it fits in. Like we have this thing that we do here called gas station design that we just call it that, which looks like it's at a country gas station. And if you just pulled that out and isolated it from the other things we do, you would think this is really shitty design work. Go back and try again. And we will be like, no, this is what we meant it. Because when you put it together with everything else, it makes you feel a certain way. Like not too polished. You know what I mean? There's something about it that's important in our overall thing. But most companies wouldn't be bold enough to take that kind of a risk.
Yeah.
Because it can look really amateurish. And it can come across that way. And that doesn't bother us,
Yeah. Yeah.
In fact, it delights me. Just try to anybody who thinks that we're an amateur is fine by me.
Yeah. Yeah. Keep believing that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, it's so funny. You talk a lot about storytelling and sense, and I remember so vividly, like I have this memory of being a little child and my mom walking me to preschool, and there was this coffee shop that had this specific smell, and I've always remembered that smell in those sights. And then when I tasted the Black Cat espresso ice cream, I was like, oh my god, this tastes like that smell. Like, this tastes the way coffee
So that's
smells.
what the power of ice cream is. So ice cream absorbs scent, and coffee is actually a scent. It's the oil that's in the coffee bean is actually a scent. When you steep coffee in water, you get that sort of plant material steeping in there, so it makes it taste a certain way. The water is very bitter, and what we know as coffee. And maybe you get some of those oils like that kind of rise to the top, especially in like a really deep, dark French roast or something, that you get those oils that like rise to the top, and when you're drinking it, you kind of smell that a little bit. But mostly it's like you're tasting the bitterness of the coffee. But contrast that with opening up a bag of freshly roasted coffee.
Right.
That scent is not what happens in water, because it's an oil-soluble scent. So it will adhere to the butterfat in the cream. And then butterfat has this beautiful property of melting below body temperature. Not all fats are like that. Cocoa butter has a much higher melting point, so it's like it doesn't melt when you touch it. But butterfat like relaxes immediately on your tongue, and all of that scent comes out. And so then you smell it kind of in reverse. But that's exactly what it is.
Yeah.
It's that scent.
Yeah,
It was just so crazy reading that, because I was like, holy shit, like she does that.
Yeah,
you know, like that is
that's what mint is, and even vanilla, even a synthetic vanilla, even a super cheap synthetic vanilla is a scent.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, it's almost like you can think of it as an edible perfume.
Yeah.
Especially probably a super cheap one.
Yeah.
But, you can go all the way up to a single farm, single origin vanilla that's gorgeous. And it's just like, that's what it is. It's a scent. It's not a flavor. I mean, it's not a taste on your tongue. Vanilla bean, like chocolate, would taste just really bitter and not have a lot of taste on your tongue. But the scent in your nose would be...
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that is like, that's what makes you so unique in what you're doing, is because you truly do focus on that. And like all the mentions of emotion and how you put, like, how you focus so much on that when you're creating, you know, making business decisions. Like, you're also doing, like, scent is so much tied to an emotion. Like, even as we're talking about it, like, when we're talking about coffee, everyone starts thinking about that morning coffee, like morning glow.
We all know what that is.
Yeah.
Right.
And it just, like, you get lost in that. And that's what makes it so amazing, because beyond being so successful, it's not like you're successful with a product that's, you know, like Jeni's is an incredible ice cream, and everyone knows that. And I mean, partly, like, since I've moved to Columbus, it's always been like, that's the go-to ice cream. Like, it's so the success, like, you can see as we're talking to you, all these pieces are coming together. It's a perfect storm. And I think that is, you know, what makes it so unique to you, and like what you see.
Well, and I see, you know, people in business school, and how we're talking about business now. It's very popular right now. And I see, you know, business plans and people who want to sort of simplify or oversimplify what it is that they're going to do. It's like 3-step process for this, or the, you know, you can all fit on one page in a business plan or whatever. And I think, like, what we do is so complex that it's, like, almost not scalable. Like, it doesn't make sense. It's almost, it feels nearly impossible. But that's actually, the best businesses are like that. You know what I mean? So it's very messy. It's not as clean as I think what people think business is. They think it's sort of like, you know, I don't know, make this ice cream and it's this profit and whatever, and you just boil it down to this and you're a genius when you come up with this, like, very simple sort of structure, this business model, this whatever. I mean, there's all of it. When you read any business case, almost it feels like it's so simplified, but when you really get into it and see behind the scenes, like, what happens to birth a business, to bring a business to life, to raise a business, it's really, really messy. And complex and nuanced. And like, I always think, like, there's just, like, point A to point B. It's like straight line is the fastest way from point A to point B, but it's never like that. It's like so many swerves, like a bowl of spaghetti, you know, like getting over there. And that's what's so, I don't know, I think that's probably one of the things that feels hard about your generation, is that everything feels like it's a 1, 2, 3 thing. You know, you on Instagram, it's like my 6 steps, or, you know, whatever, but easy, whatever. You know, like, whether it's body type or exercise or business or, like, anything, everything seems like it's, like, in a quick system.
Right.
And I just don't think anything is actually like that. And so it feels, like, disappointing when you're not making it as easy as somebody else is or whatever. But it's our business is very much an example of that. Like, we're not afraid of it being, you know, messy and making decisions and trying things and failing and you know, trying something else and whatever.
I feel like anyone, like, do people really believe that things are that easy, like 1, 2, 3 steps, or is it just like a way of coping?
I think even subtly we do. I think it's like, I think we're hard on ourselves when we look at how messy things really are. I mean, being a mom is another one of those things. Like, you know, I remember, you know, I had children before Instagram, but, like, I remember thinking, like, oh, it'll be great. I'll be the kind of mom that can take my kids travel internationally. I can go to restaurants with my kids and my babies and all this stuff. And it ended up not being like that. And what we see about motherhood is very different from what it actually is. Very vastly different from what it actually is. It's much, I don't want to say harder, because that seems whatever, but I mean, it's just much, 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 much more complex. And everyone's different, but we only see one kind of mother presented in the world. You know what I mean? And I think the same is true for careers. I definitely see it's true for people who are entrepreneurs. You know, I think it's all a lot more nuanced and messy, gnarly. Which is actually what makes it fun. It's like, you know, it's like an adventure. You know?
Well, speaking of adventure, I have to ask you about this, because I think people, if they don't know, they'll be surprised to know that you just collaborated with Tyler, the Creator. Which
I was like,
shocked.
Okay.
I mean, I went to, you know, in high school, I was going to his concert. Like, he's very, you know, so how, I mean, I read a little bit about how it came about, but, I mean, was that a surprising collaboration?
It was very surprising. I mean, Tyler reached out. He's a big fan. He likes to ride his bike over to our Los Feliz shop in LA and with his buddies, and he's awesome. So we jumped at the opportunity, and I went out and met with him, and we kind of, weirdly, we're from 2 completely different places. We're different ages. We're like, we couldn't be more different from, you know, the top. But when it comes down to it, we're so similar in so many ways, and we really bonded deeply from our very first meeting. And that was one of the most fun things I ever did. So he's awesome, and I just say, I don't know, I just think he's wonderful.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
Is there anyone that you've been like starstruck by that will come to you and say, oh, I love your products, I love your stores?
Who am I starstruck by? I don't know. I don't feel like I've ever been like that kind of a person who feels. I mean, I'm always an introvert, so I always feel uncomfortable around new people.
Yeah, like, I don't know if it's because you're a star.
I don't think you have to be a star to make me uncomfortable. But at the same time, like I don't really think in that way.
Yeah.
You know.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think so.
Not to say that I don't like look up to people and think people are awesome.
Yeah.
Because I do, but I don't know.
Yeah, I think that there might be one day, like I'm kind of the same way. I can relate to that. Like, I honestly, weirdly, have met a lot of celebrities. Just like, I honestly like probably 6, and I'm like, I don't know why, I have nobody, but like, but I was like, I've never been like super like, oh my gosh, this person.
Over it, yeah.
But I feel like, I mean, if it was like Oprah, like,
oh yeah,
I'd probably like that might.
If I met Oprah and be like, okay, like what, like is like, I mean, I would automatically assume that she and I are going to work on something together, which is so ridiculous to even presume.
Yeah,
you know, I would go into it just believing that, and then she'd have to like let me down in a big way.
I don't think she
honey,
would.
Yeah, but so
that's
gently.
not how it goes.
Yeah. So, are you gonna go to Tyler's concert?
When he's here, yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Are you gonna go?
That is so amazing.
I can't wait because I know Tyler, you know, just as a guy, and like when I saw him flip into Igor on the just I mean on the screen through the screen, I just couldn't believe it. I just think it's so wonderful, and he's like, you know, definitely such an entertainer and so talented. And I can't wait to see that in person. I think it's gonna be really cool.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Is there anyone else you're like, maybe I'll do a collaboration? Like, did you ever think you were gonna do a collaboration of that sort?
I mean, no, not exactly. I mean, there are people who I'd love to do collaborations with, but mostly they're artists, you know, and definitely musicians. I mean, I definitely think that flavor is a lot like music notes, and I don't know much about music, but I know a lot about notes of scent and flavor, and I think they're similar. So when I look for people who I want to do collaborations with, I like to see people way outside of food. I don't really have much interest in doing something with like a celebrity chef or something like that.
Yeah.
So artists would be, or designers or musicians or whatever. So I don't know.
Yeah. And it's kind of like if they're not familiar with the process or the industry or what have, you know, they're probably going to surprise you because their ideas are going to be. That's what's going to make it so much fun. Yeah. You know, where we both can learn from each other. Yeah. But we don't pay for collaborations. So that's something that we'll never do. And that's interesting because a lot, you know, so in terms of me reaching out to people, then it's sort of like, well, sure, we can do a collaboration, but then it's whatever. So, you know, I'm not, you know, we'll never do one unless it just really feels right. And just we feel like we're in it together and you know, very like organic and it has to feel right. It has to feel like we're both gonna, you know, learn something in this process and have a lot of fun and
That's amazing. Well, you know, our podcast is called Girls Still Love You. It's like, I mean, our whole thing is like, sometimes it's hard to love yourself, sometimes it's hard to love your friend, but at the end of the day, like, we'll talk later. No, it's not hard to love Cassandra, but you know, but you just do at the end of the day. I mean, do you think you love yourself?
I do, and so I'm okay being uncomfortable and even self-conscious and all of that. But I do, at the end of the day, like I spend every day wondering what kind of trouble I'm going to get into. At morning, I mean, I'm pretty sure that at some point I'm going to look like an idiot or whatever today. But I think something that's been important for me since I was young, I mean, at some point I decided, like, because it's so uncomfortable to be me, that at the end of the day I would forgive myself every night. And so I do. Yeah. Wow. And, you know, whatever. You know what I mean? And then just go back into it tomorrow. And so sometimes, you know, when I was younger, I had to, like, look in the mirror and actually look at myself in the eye and be like, I forgive you. Yeah. Like, because some of the stuff that I was doing was really stupid and embarrassing. Yeah. And now I don't have to do that, but I do still have that practice of, like, let it go, you know, and self-forgiveness, I think, is the first thing, because you really feel shitty when you have that guilt and that shame is the worst, you know what I mean? Yeah. And I think you can't get through that unless you actually are cool with forgiveness first to yourself.
Yeah.
Let's just let it go.
Yeah. Well, it's so hard to be, authentic and feel like, unapologetic for even the smallest thing. Like, I didn't scoot my chair over or something, and that was my first impression. Or it's like so stupid the way we think through
And
things.
that never goes away.
Yeah.
Like just this morning, I had a whole other thing I can't explain because it takes too long. But I had a thing that I did something like that, and I was like, oh my god, this person thinks that I am the biggest idiot in the entire world.
Yeah.
But whatever, that's just how it is. That never goes away. You just have to get better at forgiveness.
Yeah.
Self-forgiveness, because nobody actually cares. Ultimately, at the end of the day,
Right.
nobody actually cares.
Yeah.
About your dumb failings.
Yeah, because we're all thinking the same dumb things.
We're all thinking about ourselves,
Yeah,
not
not
other
thinking
people.
about you, right?
Once you remind yourself, no
Yes.
one cares about.
No one does.
Yeah.
And if they do notice that you do something stupid, it only feels good.
Yeah.
In a way that's they're human.
Yeah.
You know what
Yeah.
I mean? They're human, and that's awesome. Nobody's ever glad that somebody doesn't feel. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
Right.
yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Remind ourselves to be human.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I don't know. We're coming up on an hour, so we kind of want to stick to the
Nice.
schedule.
Yeah.
But I don't know if there's anything else you wanted to add, or you. I am this was so fun. I'm been on the edge of my seat. I'm sweating.
No, me too. I know. I'm like,
Sorry, guys, it's so hot in here. I have no windows that you can open. Lots of windows, just no air.
Yeah.
no, this has been amazing. And it's interesting how, you're our second interview, and it's different. It's different, but it's the same sort of thesis of be yourself. I mean, that's sort of a lot of what I'm taking from what you're saying.
Well, and what would be very different, I think, is that from a very young, I never worked for anybody else. I never had to, I wouldn't have any idea how to survive that, but at the same time, I have a different it's a very different path.
Yeah.
Of sort of building your own world, but then having to earn everyone you have in your life. So
Right.
every single person that's here, I'm not going to say that I earned every one of those people, but I earned many of them who then earned other people.
Right.
By doing my part, by trying to be as good as I possibly can, be at my job, and trying to every year get better and better, because this company changes every year, and so I have to adapt to that every single year and try to make sure that I'm earning those around me, and that's this amazing team.
Right.
Versus, I guess, understanding what it would be like to rise up in a company. I have no idea how to do that.
Yeah. Actually,
and they're two totally different. I'm sure. But so it's
sure.
kind of cool that you have two totally different perspectives on.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
hope to get quite a few if we can.
Yeah, and
Different perspectives.
Heather definitely was someone who climbed her way up, and I don't know if you have listened to her. She is a just incredible businesswoman, but she has those perspectives too. And at the end of the day, it's just believing in yourself and being confident that you can do whatever you're thinking you can do. And she just has so much wit, and she's hilarious, and I think this was such an amazing, that's how life works. We didn't plan to be oh, Jenny's going to be on the podcast. Obviously we tried to plan for it.
We did plan it, because I have to tell you this. I put it on my vision board when we started in February. I said, get Jenny on our podcast.
That's awesome.
And I it was such a huge, I just didn't know if it would ever happen, and it did. So
yeah, so thank
very
you.
grateful.
That's so cool.
So
I
much.
can't wait.
for saying
Congratulations
that.
on your podcast.
Thank you.
I'm sure that it will be very well received, and
Yeah.
it's great, and it's so cool. I love the concept of it. And
Thank you.
I think you guys are going to do great.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks.
Yay.
Thanks for being a part of it.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Appreciate it.